because my office at home is just a horrible place to be, unless it's 2 o'clock in the morning.
Are you in the basement?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay.
Gotcha.
This is Sarah Levison,
This is Paul Tiger.
and this
We're
is Both Sides of Center.
We've been off for a little bit, so if we seem rusty, we'd have to clean the rust out there. So what's our topic today, Paul?
Well, we were going to talk about my secret friend,
What's her name, Paul?
CORA.
Oh, my. Is she a nice person?
No, she's not.
Well, I thought she's very helpful to most people,
She is.
and not just journalists.
But she can be mean to government,
Mean or just holding government accountable?
holding government accountable.
So who is CORA?
CORA is
Or what is CORA?
the Colorado Open Records Act. And I can't even tell you how long it's been in existence. I want to say that it's early 80s. And
However, I want to mark the fact that this is the occasion of when we're filming this show is just after the 50th anniversary of Watergate. So we want to talk about finding information about what's going on with Watergate.
was
certainly,
kind of an open records act, wasn't
yes,
it?
investigative journalism at its best. But also, we're sitting in this period of time between Juneteenth and 4th of July, and so our freedoms are multitudinous in this country.
I
think the
that
freedom
could
to
be-
gain information about your government is a really good aspect to talk about today.
I think this is probably a time when people do think about government. Currently, the House Select Committee is investigating the January 6th. And that's actually some very interesting, not CORA, but what would that be?
FOIA.
FOIA. Interesting things that people have found out. The Congress and investigators from records and of course what people have kept secret. Now,
But there can't be many secrets if you have a Freedom of Information Act filing
20
request.
20 years from now, we could still be looking at these documents.
Although there are records that are sealed. Certain records I know about the assassination of President Kennedy. Certain documents are sealed until a certain time period has passed for national security and other reasons.
And I thought, actually, I was just reading about this the other day, is that the Kennedy assassination is now 60 years old. And I thought that we would see those records. We were going to find out that the mafia was running the government.
So let's focus back in on our Colorado state and local. So I had an occasion to go to the city clerk, and I wanted to review the last 20 years or so of minutes from one of the city's advisory committees or commissions, and I found that things got really spotty, and all they had were paper records,
Right.
and they had to go and dig in the basement to pull those files out.
Yeah.
So we should have some really good record retention now that we can scan things and just have them as an
Right,
electric
and
file.
and now that a terabyte is 40 cents. And so we would think that storage is so inexpensive that we should be able to store more of it.
Electronic storage, you mean,
Electronic
not
storage.
physical storage.
Right.
Papers.
Mind you, let's see, when I worked at the clerk's office, this is in in the 1990s, late 1990s, they had these dusty boxes that they had brought from the basement of the courthouse that we were digitizing. But they had kept these records all this time. There was a safe on the second floor of the courthouse where they had files that a commissioner had requested. And so the file would be brought and then it would be kept in that safe on the second floor. But in the meantime, if somebody else requested that document, it couldn't be found. They didn't know where it wasn't in the basement of the courthouse, and they might assume that it was lost. Shoot forward 20 years, and we're all, indexing. It's not being stored in a basement, it's being stored on your thumb drive or
So the impact for that, though,
it
is
still
that,
disappears.
well, it still disappears. However, the impact was that the per page printing charge,
Right.
when you made a Colorado Open Records Act request, would be pretty enormous,
Yeah.
like 25 cents a page.
Yeah.
And so the cost, I know a lot of state government legislation is around not, of course, in theory, the act and making a request, in theory, gives you access to those records. But actually, retaining the information, you can either take this and scribble things down and hand
Right.
copy it, or you could, at that point, you
Get a
couldn't bring in
printout.
your own printer, but now I think they'll allow you to bring your own printer in, or you pay them, the staff at that government entity, whether it be a clerk's office or some other entity, to make those
And
copies.
my experience, this was in 2002. I made a request, and the information, I said, just give it to me, put it on a floppy. And they said, but we can't do that. And I said, well, I need to be able to search through these documents. So floppy, CD, something like that. Oh no, they printed them out and then copied them. And so I had nothing that was, it was like a scan. I couldn't index anything. A few years later, I was able to, from our city clerk, gave me the 50 contracts that were for the non-for-profits, and those were all scans. So I couldn't search anything. It was all bit-mapped, and that's what John Kafalas's 2017 Senate Bill 40 put a change to.
And Senator Kafalas is from Fort Collins area.
He is. I was just thinking about that this is his final year as a county commissioner. But he was at the State House and worked on a bill from about 2014 to 2017, and there were several iterations of it, and this one finally passed, and it was reformation of the Colorado Open Records Act. And what it does is it says that the way that the data is stored is the way that it should be distributed. There shouldn't be these conversions.
Well, the conversions actually are, some people would say it's a money-making operation
Yes.
for the government that's giving it to you.
Yes.
Some people would then take the viewpoint that it's actually an impediment, a way that government can, in fact, deny you the information because it's so cost prohibitive.
You can't pay for it. Oh no, we were going to give it to you, but you can't afford it.
You can't afford it. I mean, you could sit there and read the documents, right? But you can't, if you, again, you'd have to take a pen or scan it or, bring in your own apparatus to do it. And that could be, costly to you.
There was an interesting note in here.
This is from
this is the Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition.
one of my favorite things to read is their newsletter.
Yeah.
So we'll put up that reference for you.
And one of the things that was interesting here was about a problem in Aurora, where Aurora had.
They were going to be. Well, which
no,
one are you thinking about?
They preceded this in code.
Oh.
They said no, we'll be very open about it. However, you can only get it in printout format at 25 cents a page.
Well, besides the per page costs, sometimes what they allocate for what their true cost of staff time is going to be extraordinary too. upwards of $35,
So they're not charging you,
$40 an hour.
They're not charging you 25 cents a page.
Right.
That's the measure for how much the labor was to do this, which was press the retrieve button. Press the retrieve button. It's like electronic recounting of ballots. Just press the tally button, and you get the same idea.
So from a taxpayer's point of view, though, I just looked at, in the newsletter from the Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition newsletter at the end of May, they had a little blurb that Boulder Valley School District has actually had to hire someone to just be a clerk for open records requests.
Right.
So is it too much money for, if you're looking at a taxpayer, is it worth our taxes, because you're always focused on taxes, Paul, is it worth using some tax money?
I'm never focused on taxes. I'm always focused on open records.
But I think that that would be a very strong use of tax money, to have somebody there that is going to focus on this and be experienced to expedite and be efficient about the time charged to someone making an open records request. So tell me, there's paperwork involved?
Yes.
So you fill out a piece of paper.
Yes.
Does every form of government have a different piece of paper? Is it a different form, or is it a standard form?
I think they're all different. I don't think there is a standard form. They pretty much say the same thing. A lot of this was laid out by the legislature and the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State is probably the person or entity that has the most requests for records. However, they really have a very large open field of records anyway. So I think that that it's like what we were talking about, the LLC amendment a few episodes back. There's boilerplate for that, and everybody has their own form, and all tends to have the same words in it, but it looks different.
Yeah.
And you're requesting more information, or all information, or any information about some event, some historical record.
Except, there's a time deadline. For example, you can't keep emails from my time on City Council, unless someone had gone in with a open records request and downloaded all my emails. They're gone now, and because I've been out of office since 2015. So emails disappear pretty rapidly, though. 90 days, isn't it?
And I personally don't think I think that email as a mode of communication is going away. When you ran for mayor, which was in 2019?
2017 was the last time I ran.
2017. Okay. So I went back to look at all of the campaign finance records going back to your first run.
2005, yeah.
But was it at a year short, they cut it all off and threw it away. And it wasn't there anymore. And I couldn't find it. You had the records.
Of course, I still have them.
Right. I
have boxes of the paper stacked in my basement and upstairs in the closet, yeah.
Keeps the basement warm. Run for office. It'll keep your house warm. Yes. So I have records too that, as a matter of fact, working on the campaign finance reform committee, or the task force, I have all of those records, and the city no longer has any of them. And this was an effect on ordinances that have to do with campaign finance reform. So really, one of the things that's important is when people make a law is what's the intent. So if I see a law that is maybe not being implemented maybe the way I think it should be or whatever, I look it up and I find out that the sponsor of that bill is still around, and I can call them up and find out, what did you intend? Which often the prosecutors will even do that. The Attorney General will say, well, what was the intention here? It's not clear.
Let's talk a little bit about when you need an open records request. For example, my case recently, I went in and said, hey, can I look at all the minutes because they're not digitized. I can only find minutes electronically on the city website to a certain thing. And I didn't actually have to file a form. I just asked them if you could, so that I could just come in and sit and read them and pay for a few copies. But there's no cost to file a request, and there's an expectation of timeliness where your request, there's going to be communication.
Right.
And then, I mean, I think that if you're going to set yourself a budget, you still have to, and I guess it's somewhat the discretion of the city clerk. How much is this going to cost?
So,
And how much are they going to charge you?
10 years ago, I asked for copies of all of the contracts that the city had with non-for-profits providing health and human services. And I was asked, do you want that in hard copy or on a CD? And I said, hard copy? Oh my God, no, absolutely, I want it on a CD. Well, that was great because they gave it to me for free. But if I would have wanted it as hard copy, then I would have to start setting a budget. Because it would
Well,
have
and
cost.
I guess if you want, you could provide them now with a thumb drive. That they wouldn't have to pay for the thumb drive, but they would still be the cost of staff
I
time.
would not. I would strongly discourage anybody in government from being handed a hard drive off the street, plugging it into their computer. That sounds like
That could be a virus
Stuxnet.
situation. Yeah.
The Israelis are going to blow up your computer.
Or something. The Russian mob will be taking every penny out of the city's treasury.
But yes, the costs are could be astronomical, but mostly they're fairly minimal. Because we now have all these computerized systems. It used to be that
But
someone
it's
says,
still the cost of a thumb drive and principally the cost of that staff person.
well, the cost of that staff person, but I'm saying is that it's going down in cost. It used to cost more. One reason is that they wanted to print everything on paper and charge us for that. But the other reason is that everything is based on digitized, everything. We don't saying, oh, we have to digitize it to give it to you. No, we have to undigitize it to give it to you. So it really should cost much less than it has. If you're going to get into a project where you're going to start getting records from all these different locations to correlate something together, you might spend some time there. And that is where you're going to be paying for somebody's labor in government.
Well, and let's talk a little bit. So if you wanted, for example, there's stuff that's already available. Like if you wanted to look at the minutes of planning and zoning, all those records are available. And you could make a CORA request if you wanted to see all the documents and the notes that the staff used to prepare the presentations. You could look at case files for the city attorney's office for cases the city has legal things. One thing, though, that you really can't do is when city council goes into executive session.
Right.
However, by law, the executive session has to be
Recorded.
titled as precisely as possible. And you are only allowed, being someone who had been in executive session,
talk about those topics.
That's your space for your topic.
Right.
You can't expand it. You can't go this way. You can shrink it maybe, but that's what you're allowed to talk about.
Right.
And
So
the
if
city
there's-
attorney's responsibility is to cut off discussion, and that tape has to be retained for a certain period of time. And in one case, there was a lawsuit to get the tape. And the tape was not gotten by the people making the CORA request. It was sent to a judge to review the tape.
And he couldn't review the tape because they never turned the tape
It wasn't
recorder
turned
on.
But in other cases, there have been
Yeah.
legal actions. And the reason it goes to a judge is the judge would be the arbitrator of the judge.
I'm sorry,
whether or not.
I digress there. That really, though, is the way to go about it, is that executive sessions shall be recorded, and a judge can review that and decide whether or not it can be made public to plaintiffs in a lawsuit or
Or journalists.
or general public.
Right. And the reason why those executive sessions are taped and why they are executive sessions is that they are protected under certain categories: personnel, legal,
real estate.
yeah,
They're buying real estate, and they don't want the whole world to know. The price.
and negotiating contracts. Yeah. So there are certain things, but the point of it is that decisions you can discuss things in an executive session, in a closed session. You cannot make a motion and a second and vote on anything.
Right.
You can't
And
suggest
so
anything.
So it's always
as an action.
telling or suspicious that when members exit the executive session and go into a live session and immediately make a decision, you wonder, that's really what they wanted to do in the executive session. And I've seen that a number of times. So
I think that there's a suspicion on that, but when having been in executive sessions, you kind of get the when people are making comments, which way the wind is blowing for them.
Right.
And sometimes people have an opportunity to think about it, whether it would be an hour later if they're in a regular session or a couple of days later. Then you have to give direction to your attorney in public, and so people will know what's happening.
And in an executive session, it's not like people are keeping secrets from each other. They have a common topic that they're all going to talk about together.
Right.
For whatever reason, it isn't a topic that you would discuss in public. And again, I'd say that these are personnel issues.
Well, for example, a recent case that the Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition newsletter talked about is in Aurora, where they were censuring a city council member, and they were in executive session, and then they come out and they decide they're not taking any further action.
Right.
And so there was some suspicion about whether or not people had made an actual decision there. So
well, but you can. I mean, why should there be a focus on when you made the decision? You're a counselor, you're making decisions in government. At some point in time, you make the decision. And am I going to cross-examine you and find out, when did you make this decision?
Well, I think
did
that
you make this decision
I think
after?
the point of decision-making, you can split hairs around it. However, I think that if there was a general nod around the room, whether or not there was a consensus, whether or not there was a motion and a second, that's the formal Rogers Rules of Order, is not a matter to that. So, so Paul, let's just quickly walk through. Who do we contact if we, in the city, you want to find out something that you can't find on the internet?
The city clerk.
Which currently is Don Quintana.
And in the county, would that be the county clerk?
Oh, I would just call the commissioner's office myself. Start there.
Right, and actually, so I've contacted the county attorney a number of times. The county has an attorney that's separate from the district attorney, and they usually are able to guide me where to be filing my CORAs, because just simply filing a CORA, walking in and handing it to the county commissioners or something, that's really not going to get you. You really have to know where you want the information.
And you also have to be specific about what you're looking for, because, again, it's how you ask the question about what information you get back.
So, for example, here, I've been dealing with an issue that has to do with non-for-profits. And at first I'm talking to the county assessor and then the county treasurer, who then refers me to an agency in Denver, which is a part of DOLA, the Department of Local Affairs. And that is where I'm going to be filing my CORA. But if I would have filed the CORA in Boulder, they would have just said, well, that's very nice, there's nothing we can do for you.
We don't have what you're
we
looking
don't
for.
have what you're looking for. So you have to make sure that you make your filing in the correct place. And that has to do with a little investigation, because if you just keep filing CORAs and getting denials, you're going to think, oh, government's against me. They don't really want to. Well, you're looking in the wrong place.
Well, I also think that how long records are retained and what's retained. For example, the proceedings of the city council, the official record is what the clerk presents in the minutes that are voted on. The electronic record of someone storing all those hours of live television television recording, whatever, are not considered an official record. So those will disappear. In fact,
They're on YouTube. We have to
some
wait
of them are.
Wait
Some
for
of
YouTube
them,
to disappear.
Many of them were on VHS tapes.
Yes.
In the library, and I was doing some research, this is 15, 20 years ago, and looking at the conversations at council meetings on a particular issue I was researching, and I was told by the librarian, well, if you come back 3 months from now, none of these. And I'm like, tell me when you're throwing them out. I will dive in the dumpster and gather them. But there was no retention policy for that because it was
There's
not
also-
the official, so only the notes. What
There's
happens if
also
the clerk
an issue
misses
about
stuff?
conversion. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So we go, and 10 years ago, they converted everything into paper at 25 cents a shot. Okay. So, but now, what is the conversion? We talked about microfiche. What happened to microfiche? What happened to microfilm? Did it end up being digitized and scanned, and now it's in some digital format? What
Well, a
digital
lot of those
format
original
is that?
documents were kept for a very long time,
Yes.
those records.
Yes. And I know that I can still look up microfiche from the newspaper. Okay.
And I think that archive's held by
At the museum.
Longmont Museum. So we do have some archive, but it's not a Freedom of Information Act.
Now listen, I've had some difficulty finding certain articles about the Longmont Emergency Unit over the last 25 years. Maybe what I should do is file a CORA with the museum.
That might save you time, but it would cost you money.
Yes, it would
So
cost.
let's go back to some process stuff. So you file it, and then there is an expectation of response with a certain amount of time, and then getting the documents, and then from there forward, really that information is in your possession, and you actually own it too.
And I will say that if you're working with cooperative people in government, be nice, and they'll be cooperative. They may
Well, I think
say,
the first rule always, Paul, is to be nice, is to be kind.
unless it's a
because,
cop.
Well, these are, but these are people that are willing to help you.
Yes.
And they may leave you breadcrumbs.
Yes.
And
But,
that's
well,
a very
this is
nice
what-
thing for them
this
to
is the
do.
breadcrumbs,
But they want to be.
the breadcrumbs that I wanted to talk about, and that is that if you're asking for a requester, try to be more general about it, because you might find that the clerk that you're dealing with says, oh, listen, there's this whole litany of addresses or URLs or whatever, and here's a cheat sheet that we have prepared for people who are nice. And now you can go and do this research on your own. And mind you, you will do research on your own. Don't have an expectation that government's going to do it for you at 25 cents a page.
Or however much an hour. So we can look a little bit about, or talk a little bit about something that you and I discussed before we got on camera, about a interesting factor of the Colorado Open Records Act is that you can make a CORA request to find out who's making CORA requests in your city.
That I thought was a very strange.
And it was...
But I thought about it, and it sounds like, yeah, that's public
Yeah,
record. Why
yeah,
not?
Yeah.
So-
And there's a gentleman who's a physics professor who has a Facebook page, and we'll put up the reference for you, that researched this, and apparently he writes a lot of CORA requests because he's just interested in government and things, but brought up something that was written up in the Denver Gazette recently about someone who had made a CORA request, and a television personality found out they were making that CORA request, and basically outed them and embarrassed this person. And even though their request was not fulfilled, it was withdrawn.
Yes.
The original person making the CORA request. And it was just, the article really talked about when there's an imbalance of power, somebody who's a professional, like a journalist, that had, a larger voice in the community, and you're making CORA requests, everything is open. But
Right.
do you then use that power to
Well,
diminish, to call somebody out who might be doing the same work?
So I don't want our viewers to get the idea that this is normal.
No, that's not normal.
That's not normal. But everything about it is open. So if you made a CORA request, that's not a secret.
That's right. Because it's a government action that has to be open and transparent.
Yeah. And I will tell you that there are people in government who are a little confused about CORA. I often take pictures of people who work in government, and they say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't want my picture taken." And I said, "Then you should have gotten a job in the private sector." People who work in the city government, was actually a code enforcement officer who told me, he says, "No, you can't get that information." And I said, "Well, yes, I can." And this was about a complaint. She said that someone had filed a complaint. And I said, "Well, I'm going to find out who that was." And she says, "Oh, we don't tell you that." And I said, "Oh, but you do."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so to find out who had made somebody's complaining about your barking dog. The city says that there's somebody complaining about your barking dog.
It's not anonymous.
It's not anonymous. You can find out who's been making the complaints about your barking dog.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So let's do a quick little wrap up. CORA is a state law. It's got local implications.
And by the way, CORA as a state law in Colorado is so strong. There are
Yes.
other places where I'd say, "Oh no, in Colorado you can just do that." And they said, "Well, you can't do that here in Wyoming."
Well, and CORA has been very effective, not for just journalists, but there are a lot of government entities that do things in executive session that shouldn't be in executive session.
Right.
And the public has a right to know what's happening with their government. And anyone filing a CORA request, I'm not sure of this, but if you file a CORA request, there's no repercussions your government can take
No.
against you.
No.
So it is your right as a resident to find out what's going on. So CORA is our friend. In some ways, she could be our best friend. And
She's our secret friend.
She's our secret friend. I guess we'll have to call this CORA, our secret friend episode. But I really think it's a tool. And again, if you're going to file a CORA request, read what you can about and find out where your gaps are. And then approach the request with respect to the people that are going to help you.
Yes, respectful for the people that are going to help you. I can say that there's an interesting thing about CORA requests that I've discovered. I don't use the words Freedom of Information Act because that's kind of a federal thing. I use the words CORA, and I actually say it, the Colorado Colorado Open Records Act, while speaking to people. Because in government, there are often people who will say, "You can't find that out. I'm going to keep that a secret." And I say, "I'm going to get a CORA, and I'm going to find that out." They all of a sudden, they're suddenly open because, just like I said, you can find out who's been filing CORAs. You can find out which department has the most CORAs filed. And suddenly they say, "Oh gosh, there's going to be another one. We're just going to give you the information."
And filing a CORA, if a department has a lot of CORAs, it's not a necessarily good or bad
No.
that people are looking. It's just people are seeking information.
People are seeking information. So
And the reason why they're seeking information can be any number of reasons.
I would be more interested in the government entity that has a lot of CORAs that have been denied or redacted in such a way that it's just a big sheet of Sharpie.
Yes.
And
Well, that means you reformat the question and ask a different way. Yeah.
And it's interesting that I've read a lot of stuff about Aurora, and we've mentioned Aurora a few times. Mike Kaufman, who used to be the Secretary of State, is the mayor of Aurora. And I wonder why they couldn't be a little more open. Actually, Aurora is just fine. I think that they are open with their records. There are other things going on.
Well, Paul, this has been a very interesting discussion. I hope you all have learned a little bit more about our secret friend, CORA, the Colorado Open Records Act. So I'm Sarah Levison.
And I'm Paul Tiger.
And we're both sides of center.
How long did we run that time?
It was 32 minutes.